When something mysterious arrives on the planet, wiping out half the world's population, a new species of hybrid babies begins to emerge and they become the only hope of preventing the extinction of humanity. Today we're going to recap the story of the series, Sweet Tooth, from 2021. Dr. Adi is a renowned physician who detected one of the first patients infected with the H5G9 virus, considered to be the worst of all time. After the start of a global crisis was announced, everyone was advised to stay indoors to prevent the infection from spreading. However, despite the curfew, Ronnie, Adi's wife, ended up being infected and the doctor had to rush to take her to hospital. Due to people's desperation, the whole city was in complete chaos, but Adi managed to get his wife admitted. While waiting for Ronnie to recover, the doctor was called to the maternity ward because something extraordinary had happened. While the whole world was plunged into complete chaos, hybrid babies began to be born, with human characteristics mixed with those of animals. Among them was a boy called Gus, who was taken by his father to live in the forest. The man knew that the government would use the hybrid children as guinea pigs for experiments to try to understand the genetic mutation. So Richard decided to take his son away from civilization, and for several years they lived happily in the forest. Years later, while walking through the forest, Gus came across some footprints and decided to follow them to the border. That day, for the first time, the boy crosses the fence that borders the forest and hears a roar. Terrified, he decides to run away, but is found by his father, who picks him up and runs back into the forest. After being scolded, the boy runs home and Richard goes after him. Just as he's about to enter the cabin, the man hears someone else approaching and goes to meet them. That afternoon, he meets a hunter who sets out to warn his colleagues about the existence of a hybrid in the area. Knowing that the invader will return at any moment, the man asks his son to hide in a trapdoor he has built inside the hut and goes out to look for the enemy. Minutes later, Gus hears some screams and decides to go out to look for his father. After getting rid of the hunter, Richard ended up being infected by the virus, but managed to return home. For several days, Gus took care of his sick father and, when he realized that he wouldn't be able to survive the virus, Richard decided to tell him the truth. The man tells him that Gus's mother is called Birdie and that she is still alive, but asks the boy never to cross the fence to look for her. After Richard's perishment, the boy had to learn to manage on his own and began to carry out all the tasks he had learned from him. A few months later, Gus found a suitcase that had been hidden by his father and, when he opened it, he came across a photo of his mother along with a sign informing him of the location of a safe house for hybrid children. Tired of living alone in the forest, Gus decides to pack his bags and leave, hoping to find Birdie at the shelter. However, halfway there, he ends up falling into a trap and is almost hit by an arrow. While hiding, Gus ends up being captured by a human and tries to attack them to escape. At that moment, one of the hunters prepares to eliminate him, but is hit by a shot. When Tommy approaches with his rifle, Gus takes the opportunity to escape while the second hunter is eliminated. Terrified, the boy runs back to the hut and hides in the trapdoor. Minutes later, Tommy appears and finds the deer boy's hiding place. When he discovers that he can speak, the man is surprised and gives up on capturing him. After he leaves, Gus gathers all his courage to start a new journey and decides to cross the fence, even though he knows all the dangers that await him outside. After a few hours on the road, the young man meets Tommy again and asks him to take him to Colorado. However, the man refuses to help him because they are several kilometers apart. Even so, Gus insists on following the hunter and proves useful by using his keen nose to find food. While Tommy keeps watch, the boy enters the cabin and realizes that the place used to be a store. Looking at the wall, Gus spots a deer's head hanging and tries to escape, but ends up being captured. Soon after, a boy and his parents approach them and, when they realize that Gus is harmless, the family invites them to dinner. During the meal, Tommy takes the opportunity to exchange information with George and his wife, and Gus asks permission to play with Rusty. It's the first time the boy has met another child, and Bev is happy to see her son have someone to play with. In the middle of the night, before leaving, Tommy steals some canned goods from the pantry and ends up being caught by Bev. Realizing that he intends to sneak out, the woman asks if the hunter doesn't intend to take Gus, and Tommy tries to convince her to adopt the deer boy. After talking to her husband about this possibility, Bev goes to say goodnight to the boys and tells them that she needs to talk to them in the morning. However, Gus can't sleep and walks to the living room in the middle of the night. Just then, he spots Tommy leaving and realizes that a group of hunters is approaching. The men are there to capture Gus, but the couple refuse to hand over the boy. Then, just as the hunters are about to break into the house, Tommy attacks them and hits them all with an iron trap. During the fight, one of the hunters manages to get into the cabin and Gus attacks him with his slingshot. Seeing a deer approaching from behind the boy, the hunter is paralyzed with fear and ends up being hit by Tommy. After the attack, George changed his mind about taking Gus into his home, and Tommy had no choice but to take the boy away. Together, they got on a cable car and made their way to the other side of the forest to continue their journey. That night, after a long day on the road, the pair decide to stop for a rest, and Tommy reveals that there is a train taking the children to the shelter in Colorado. Upon hearing this, Gus's hopes are renewed, and, at dawn, the boy discovers that Tommy has made a costume for him. To catch the train, the pair must get to the market, where dozens of hunters are on the prowl. So Gus has to disguise himself and wears a costume so that everyone thinks he's a normal boy. Meanwhile, Dr. Adi continues to work on an antidote to cure patients infected by the H5G9 virus. His wife has been living with this disease for several years and has to take medication periodically to get rid of the symptoms and not transmit the virus. However, thanks to Dr. Bell's research, Adi is getting closer to finding a cure for this disease. The problem is that, in order to complete his research, the doctor needs to collect stem cells from the bone marrow of hybrid children, but he doesn't think it's right to do this. One day, the couple is invited to the house of one of the neighborhood residents, and, during the party, Doug ends up causing an accident. Seeing her neighbor's finger move quickly, Nancy orders Adi to take the test to see if he has been infected, and the result is positive. When they discover that Doug has been infected, his guests tie him up inside his own house and set fire to the place. That afternoon, Tommy and Gus arrive at the market, and the boy wears a helmet to pretend that his horns and ears are fake. While Tommy is out buying tickets, Gus is alone at the train station and decides to go for a walk. As he approaches the other children, the boy realizes how much those people hate hybrids and is terrified. When she realizes that the boy is afraid, Becky approaches him and tries to calm him down. Soon after, Tommy appears and hands Gus a train ticket. However, when the boy was about to get on the train, a familiar smell caught his attention, and he realized that, a few meters away, there were boxes full of the medicine that Tommy uses. After taking some pills, the pair run back to the train, but Tommy ends up being surrounded by a guard. However, before his enemy has a chance to shoot him, Tommy manages to immobilize him and runs with Gus to the train. As the vehicle is about to leave, a group of guards approach and arrest the boy, as they have discovered that he is a real hybrid. After being captured, Tommy and Gus are taken to the forest, but end up being saved by rebels who suddenly appear and attack the soldiers. To Gus's surprise, the girl who had reassured him minutes ago had known all along that he was a hybrid and had decided to save him. When she discovers that Tommy is a hunter, Becky orders her colleagues to eliminate him, but Gus begs for his friend's life, and the girl realizes that the man is no threat. Meanwhile, Amy and her adopted daughter go out shopping in the city, and, when they return home, Wendy smells smoke. Afraid that someone will find the girl, Amy orders her to hide and prepares to shoot. Luckily, the patrolman who was approaching is summoned back to base, and the two manage to return home safely. At dusk, Tommy and Gus arrive at the hideout of the rebels, also known as the Animal Army. According to Becky, the group's founder, everyone who joins her gang has to paint a picture of their favorite animal on the walls. When he meets the other gang members, Gus is overjoyed because he has never felt loved by so many people before. When asked why she helped Gus escape, Becky says that the hybrid children have come to save the planet because, unlike other humans, this new species is able to live in communion with nature. To help in this mission to rebuild the Earth, the Animal Army swore to protect all the hybrids they encountered. After having fun with his new friends, Gus asks Becky for help in finding out about his mother, and the young woman promises to find out everything she can about her. The next morning, Gus pays a visit to his friend and asks Becky to release him. However, the young woman refuses, as Tommy used to be a hunter and has eliminated countless hybrids in the past. However, when she realizes that she will never win Gus's trust if she decides to eliminate his only friend, Becky turns back and orders her allies to free him. Upon hearing this, Tigress revolts and decides to disobey her boss's orders. She then convinces her colleagues to free Daisy so that she can devour the hunter. When he realizes that Tommy is about to be eliminated, Gus decides to risk his own life to save him and manages to communicate with the tiger, who backs down when he hears his request. At that moment, two groups form and start fighting each other. While Becky and Tigress allies fight to establish their sovereignty, Gus and Tommy take the opportunity to escape. Disappointed with the group she herself created, Becky also decides to leave, and, in the meantime, Amy and Wendy welcome a new member to their family. The former psychologist lives in an old zoo and decides to turn it into a reserve to take in all the hybrid children who need her help. That afternoon, after visiting Dr. Adi and his wife, Nancy discovers that Ronnie is also infected with the virus and rushes to spread the news to her neighbors. The doctor quickly goes after her and tries to convince her to wait until he finds a cure. However, the woman refuses to listen to him and is about to tell everyone the truth when she is hit by a horse kick. Audie immediately realizes that Nancy is no longer breathing and asks his wife to help him hide the body. After being saved by Gus, Tommy feels indebted to him and, to try to repay him, decides to accompany the boy to Colorado. At dawn, the pair find Becky and the girl gives Gus an address where her mother may be living. The young woman reveals that she also intends to take the train to Colorado, and Gus convinces Tommy to go with her. To reach their destination, the trio have to cross a rope bridge and Gus ends up having an accident. After falling into a flowery field, the boy faints and is saved by his friends. 3 days have passed since Nancy's disappearance and Bob starts spreading posters around the neighborhood in the hope of finding her. That afternoon, Audie and his wife go to the doctor's office to test a new serum developed by the doctor and find the freezer door open. Inside is Nancy's body, which was found by Samantha, Addie's assistant. When they realize that their secret has been discovered, the couple try to flee, but end up being surrounded by the neighbors, who have been alerted to what has happened. When asked about Nancy's perishment, the doctor says that his neighbor was sick, so he had to sacrifice her. At that moment, Ronnie starts coughing and everyone realizes that she is infected. Immediately, the neighbors capture the woman and intend to put her down, even though they know she is not transmitting the virus due to the treatment. The group takes the couple back to their house and ties them to a chair. After spreading fuel around the house, the people start a fire to eliminate any trace of the virus. However, seconds before suffocating from all the smoke, Ronnie and Audie are saved by a team of General Abbott's soldiers, who break into the house and put out the fire. A few hours later, when the train crosses the forest, Gus and his friends start chasing it and finally manage to get into the vehicle. Luckily, they get into a wagon with no passengers and have the chance to hide before the staff find them. While his men put out the fire, the general rummages through the cupboards looking for Dr. Bell's research. After getting what he wanted, Abbott orders his men to get rid of the couple, but Audie manages to convince him to let them go, because only he knows the new genetic sequencing that will allow the disease to be cured. During the train journey, Becky and Gus sit down to look at the beautiful scenery outside and come across a wide variety of wild animals running through the plains. Just then, an employee enters the carriage and the trio have to hide to avoid being expelled. Suddenly, while hiding behind a wooden box, Gus drops one of the items from his backpack on the floor and attracts the enemy's attention. Then, when the boy is captured, Tommy decides to act and uses a tool to hit his opponent, who immediately strikes back. During the fight, Becky and Gus try to find a way to escape, but Tommy soon realizes that he knows that guy. Before the world chaos began, Tommy was an American soccer player and Timmy was his teammate. Back then, the two were great friends, so they both decide to stop dueling for old time's sake. When she sees the red ribbons tied to the fence outside the zoo, Amy realizes that the place is no longer safe, as the soldiers will appear at any moment. Upon entering the house, the woman and her daughter check the security cameras and discover that their enemies are already nearby. A few hours pass and Gus spots the big river he has to cross to get to Colorado. When he discovers that he is approaching his final destination, the boy celebrates and asks Timmy to help him figure out how to get to the Goss Grove neighborhood. Suddenly, Becky appears and informs them that there are some hunters on their way to that wagon, so to try to help them escape, Timmy asks them to follow. When they reach the last wagon, the trio have nowhere else to go, so Timmy asks his friends to jump off the train while he holds the door to delay the soldiers. After packing their bags, Amy and Wendy prepare to leave and escape with the children through the pipeline. Determined to delay the invaders, Amy gives clear directions so that her daughter and the other hybrids can hide and promises that she will find them. After a few hours of walking, Gus and his friends arrive in Essex County and the boy is even more excited, as he is closer than ever to finding his mother. Before meeting Gus, Richard worked as a cleaner at Fort Smith, one of the country's largest scientific research laboratories. Although he didn't really understand what the researchers were doing with their guinea pigs, Richard felt bad for all those caged animals. One night, in a bar, he met one of Fort Smith's geneticists and the two of them drank together for several hours. During the conversation, Birdie tells Richard how her work works and reveals that she uses the hen's eggs to test new microorganisms that can be used to develop antidotes. That night, Richard takes Birdie home and the woman invites him in, but in the middle of the night, she receives a call from her friend Judy and discovers that the military are raiding the laboratory. To help Birdie save her research, Richard uses his keys to break in and that night he meets Gus. The boy had his genome modified in the laboratory and became the first human hybrid in history. To prevent the baby from being taken by the military and used as a guinea pig for new experiments, Richard decides to help Birdie get him out of there. However, the geneticist knew that if her research fell into the wrong hands, everything would be lost. So she asked Richard to take Gus to a safe place while she set fire to the laboratory. While walking through the deserted forest, Gus spots a house in the middle of nowhere and decides to go there with his friends, believing it to be his mother's house. When he knocks on the door, the boy is greeted by Judy, a researcher who used to work at Fort Smith with Bertie. The woman says that she used to live in that house with her friend, but one night, 10 years ago, Bertie packed her bags and said she was going after Gus. Since then, Judy has never seen her again. At this point, she hands the boy a key and asks Gus to take a look at what's in the attic. Upon entering, Becky comes across some old files and discovers that the boy was created in a laboratory. When he discovers the truth, Gus feels cheated because the people he always thought were his parents didn't actually give birth to him. Furious, the boy decides to run away and runs aimlessly through the forest with the other deer in search of answers. Worried about Gus, Tommy decides to go after him and asks Becky to stay with Judy to take the boy in if he returns. While walking through the woods, Gus spots an old plane that apparently crashed there a long time ago. Shortly after the hybrids escape through the tunnels, General Aboot and his army arrive at the zoo to negotiate with Amy. However, the woman refuses to cooperate with them and only buys time for the children to escape. After completing her trap, Amy sets off hundreds of fireworks to delay the soldiers, and the youngsters take the opportunity to escape during the explosion. Going through the tunnels, they make their way to a church and Bobby ends up being captured. When she sees her friend in trouble, Wendy tries to help him, but is also discovered and arrested by the military. Minutes later, when she arrives at the scene, Amy starts calling for her daughter, but soon realizes that both she and all the other children have been taken. It's almost dark when Tommy manages to find Gus, and the boy tells him that he wants to join the other children on the reservation. Upon hearing this, the hunter decides to tell his story and reveals that he had a son very similar to Gus, but was unable to protect him. Now the universe has given him another chance to make amends for the mistake he made in the past, so Tommy intends to stay by Gus's side until the end. At this point, the boy and his friend agree to live together in the forest, and Gus tells them that he got in touch with the people on the reserve via the plane's radio. Shortly after hearing this, Tommy is shot and collapses. Then the general appears and orders his soldiers to take Gus into the truck. Trapped in a cage, the boy sees his friend's body lying on the grass and tries to understand why he isn't moving. When he arrives at the reserve, the boy is taken to the laboratory of Dr. Audie, who is heartbroken at having to sacrifice hybrid children to carry out his research. But if he doesn't, both he and his wife will be eliminated and humanity will never have access to a cure for the disease that has wiped out more than half the population. However, when he discovers that Gus can speak, Audie asks Johnny, his assistant, to bring him another patient, as he needs more time with the boy. While Gus is stuck in the lab, Becky stays at Judy's house waiting for her friends to return. When asked what happened to her parents, the young woman says that they perished of the disease, and, when that happened, the government agents took her younger sister, because she was a hybrid child. At the time, Becky was too small to stop them and spent several years looking for her little sister, but never found her. So, over time, she gave up her quest and joined other young people to create the Animal Army with the aim of protecting as many hybrids as she could. A few minutes after being shot, Tommy is found by a mysterious person who decides to help him and takes him to safety. That night, Gus is taken to prison to join the other children, and another hybrid is taken to the laboratory in his place to serve as a guinea pig. While waiting for her friends to return, Becky decides to take a look at an old photo of her sister, because she can't spend a single day without thinking about her. What the girl doesn't realize is that Wendy is still alive, having been taken in by a very loving woman who raised her as her own daughter. During the night, when he wakes up, Tommy meets the person who saved him, and Amy asks him to rest, because at dawn they will both start a rescue mission to save the children. Despite being locked up without knowing what awaits him the next day, Gus feels very happy because he meets other children like him and is welcomed. After spending several hours trying to reach the phone number left by Bertie, Becky finally gets through and discovers that the woman is alive. So what did you think of this series? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more series recaps. See you next time.